A very good afternoon or good morning, good evening to you, wherever you are. Welcome to our Thursday Global School Alliance virtual conference this afternoon. And we are looking at assessment versus examination. And are you coping under the pressure? And what are the alternatives? We'll be starting shortly, just waiting for our colleagues to arrive. We hope you've all had a lovely day or are having a lovely day wherever you are. Very good afternoon and welcome if you've just joined us. We will be starting shortly. Okay. Well, I'm going to begin with a few preliminary notices. So very good afternoon. Welcome to our GSA conference on assessment versus examination. And my name is James Blomfield. I am the Head of Education for the Global School Alliance. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Tony Camilleri, our GSA Cultural Advisor, as well as Hannah Starkey in the background, our marketing executive who is making everything work today, as she always does. Today's conference is aimed at head teachers, principals, senior leaders, subject specialists, phase leaders, as well as classroom teachers. Okay, let's look at our agenda this afternoon. So after our welcome, I will be taking you through a few updates about our SDG competition and the Student Council. Then we have our conference will be kicked off by our sponsor, Laurie Beckwith from Classlink. Then we have our guest speaker presentations. And finally, our Q&A session, as usual. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions after each speaker, but also at the end of the conference. So to begin with, I just wanted to remind you that we have our SDG competition, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, through the eyes of our students. And if I just click on this link, I will be taking you, I'll be sending this link through the chat. Do enter your students for this. It doesn't matter what age, kindergarten, primary, secondary. What we want them to do is to have a look at the UN SDGs, and we've put some links here for you to look at. And if they could draw or paint their own version of the SDG, whichever one it is, one of the 17, that would be great, and then enter it. And the full details are here on this page. I'll be sending the link through. And we're doing this in conjunction with LeapEd, and I'm working shoulder to shoulder with Jasmine Franz. The deadline is the 30th of June, so please go to it and get your students to have a go, because there will be certificates and awards. And we have some great VIPs and the event for the awarding of the certificates. And the other thing I wanted to mention was we have been talking about our Student Council, and we do want to encourage you as well to register for this. Very similar to the last page, you'll see that you can sign up for the Student Council. Here's a picture of Milie, who's based in Cambodia. She's a 10th grader at the Liger Leadership Academy, and really charismatic young student who is heading up our Student Council. She's the president, and we would like your schools involved. Again, it doesn't matter if it's secondary or primary. Milie is concentrating on the secondary side, but we also hope to cater for primary schools as well. So please follow this link and sign up your school, because we want the students to have a voice. We want to give them agency. Okay, please turn off your microphone if you're joining us, and welcome this afternoon to the GSA virtual conference. Let me just go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, and now we look at our up and coming events. Now, next we have on Tuesday, the 8th of June, good Lord, we're in June already. Our sponsor today, Laurie Beckwith, is coming back for her dedicated sponsor webinar. This is a marvellous opportunity to find out more about Classlink. She'll be telling us more about this in her presentation, but do join us for that on Tuesday, the 8th of June. Following that, we have on the 10th of June, Thursday, What's Exciting in Education? Now, those of you who are familiar with this will know it's a great opportunity. We bring in specialists who share their vision, their view of what's exciting in education. And there are some great speakers from some terrific EdTech companies providing insights and analysis, as well as inspiring you with ideas and best practice. So that's on the 10th of June. And then we have our global school fair on the 17th of June. Now, these are incredible events, and it has been suggested it's much better than a staff meeting. So you could, if you're in school, suggest your head teacher or principal, let's attend the global school fair instead of our staff meeting, because it is professional development. And again, you will have the opportunity of making many savings. Our GSA members do take great advantages in the relationships we have with our EdTech suppliers, close relationships, and it means that you will benefit from that as a GSA member. Okay, so we move on to today's event. So let me take you through our speakers. We have Roxanne Walsh, who is a teacher in Jamaica. Roxanne has been an educator for 13 years and teaches at the Louise Bennett Coverley All-Age School in Jamaica. Roxanne has been a very active delegate in our recent GSA conferences, and we are delighted to have her here all the way from Jamaica. We also have this isn't you, Tony, but we also have our colleague, Tony Camilleri, who is our GSA cultural advisor. She will be joining us to share our vision of global education and our roadmap for becoming an inspirational, award-winning global school. Tony, if you didn't know, has been a primary school teacher for many years, and she's a veteran of online events such as this, as well as brilliant workshops in schools. Next is the gentleman you see in front of you, Paul Hume. Now, Paul is a deputy head teacher in a London bilingual school who has led on curriculum assessment. Now, unfortunately, Paul won't be with us this afternoon, but he has kindly recorded his presentation in advance. So we thank you, Paul, and we look forward to seeing that. Paul's priorities are children's resilience, independence and well-being, in addition to reducing teacher workload, which are admirable priorities. I think we'd all agree. Next, we Drew Lett, who is assistant head teacher at the GEMS Education School in Abu Dhabi. Now, he's a curriculum leader for mathematics, and he's also in charge of assessment. Now, Drew is interested in becoming involved in the development of education on a national and international basis. And next we have, I'm so sorry, I've just gone one too many. Next we have Sarah Davies, who's the associate assistant head teacher and head of English as well, and a mother at the Royton and Crompton EACT Academy in the northwest of England. Now, Sarah is the author of Talking About Oracy, which focuses on the development of effective communication beyond the parameters of the classroom. And alongside her passion for teaching, a specialist in English, Sarah has written articles for newspapers such as the Times Education Supplement and the Teaching Times. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. We look forward to your presentation. But to kick us off, to start our conference, we welcome our sponsor from Classlink, Laurie Beckwith. If you didn't know, Laurie is Vice President of International Business, and she's based in the United States. Laurie has been in the global edtech industry for over 15 years and in senior leadership roles, and has conducted business in over 70 countries. So thank you, Laurie, for joining us and for starting our conference today. And I'm going to hand over to you. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And hopefully, Laurie, if you could share the screen and take over.
Thank you, James. Very lovely to meet everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I understand that we have individuals joining everywhere from Romania, India, etc. So thank you so much for being here. My name is Laurie Beckwith. I am the Vice President of International for Classlink, as James mentioned, and it's a pleasure to have a few minutes to spend with everyone today during the Global School Alliance Conference. I am located in Utah in the United States. I'm currently surrounded by the Rocky Mountains. If you haven't been here, you should come to visit. It's beautiful every time of year, but this time of year is particularly lovely. As I have a brief few minutes, I'd like to touch on student engagement and encourage you to attend the Classlink webinar that James mentioned. It is via the Global School Alliance on Tuesday, June 8th. Where I will talk about ways in which schools and administrators and teachers might improve and measure student engagement. And then I will also be talking a bit more about Classlink and our resources and capabilities and how we might help your school in addition to that. Just a quick bit about Classlink. We are an online platform that eases or makes it easier to access and manage a school's digital resources with a single sign-on solution to get rid of username and passwords, and also a detailed analytics that help both student engagement and digital resource investment and ROI decisions. As enterprise solution providers at Classlink, we work closely with K-12 schools and higher ed institutions, administrators, IT staff, curriculum teams, and teachers all around the world. And we hear from many newly remote educators or those that are in a hybrid situation or those that are moving back and forth from in-person to remote or hybrid, that are struggling in the new environment as they shifted to hybrid or fully online solutions, reducing or eliminating in-person contact with their students at many different levels, and student enrollment has dropped in independent and public schools globally. For many students, the learning environment has introduced many other factors, which include stress, confusion, a feeling of being disconnected, not supported. And with many students at home, they're facing even more distractions as well, with widely varying parenting support and increased device and technology access. Many schools, if they were unprepared for remote learning, recently rushed to create a 100% online school offering by setting up video conferencing with their students, but limit the time they spend actually using this method to interact with their students. So once students are left to study or work on their own, how are you measuring whether or not they're doing that? Because of these challenges and their scale, student engagement has become one of the most important areas of focus in the last few months. And in this webinar that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, I'd like to talk about a few of the current methods that are being used for engagement that are worth noting. One of the most consistent findings with regard to student engagement research is that teachers, and this is not a surprise, have a massive impact on the student's experience, regardless of whether the classroom, whether in the classroom directly or in a remote environment. And so in this webinar, we're going to talk about some of the ideas we can cover in more detail next week none of these really have anything to do with Classlink, but I think that they're very helpful insights. And we're going to talk about varying communication tools, how to give feedback, and some other tools, online tools that you can use for each of these different categories. How to get a little bit creative with all of that. We're also going to talk about how to help students connect with one another. And then regardless of of the methods that you do employ for student engagement, at the end of the day, success really depends greatly on the time on task for the students and your ability to measure this. And this is where Classlink specifically is most leveraged and can assist you in a couple of key ways. One, of course, with the single sign-on, but also with analytics. And because we strive to connect to all of your digital resources, we have a way of tracking that. And we create a robust source of back-end analytics to help you measure and manage the student engagement. So from the moment a user logs in to their own Launchpad, Classlink's back-end analytics tracks where they spend their time. And all of a sudden, you will know where your students have been spending their time and how much time they've been spending on those resources, which is just really invaluable in this environment. So with that being said, we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Of course, we'd love to help you. If you'd like more information before that, please take this information in front of you and contact me directly. This is my direct email address. You can also go to classlink.com/demo to get a demonstration scheduled at any time. Actually, when you go to that link, it will take you directly as well to, it comes directly into my inbox. And so I will personally be reaching out to you, whether it's me that will be doing that presentation or one of my team members around the world. And thank you again, James, for having us here at Global School Alliance. We're very pleased to be here and very much look forward to seeing each of you again in a couple of weeks.
Many thanks, Laurie. That's marvelous. Thank you.
I think you're muted, James.
Thank you so much. So sorry. Roxanne, you're our first speaker. Would you like to begin, please?
Yes, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Good morning from Jamaica and good afternoon wherever you are. Today, my focus will be on assessment versus examination, formative and summative. Assessment. Formative assessments are administered during instructions within the teaching and learning process with a purpose to detect strengths and weaknesses students are having in curriculum content. Summative or formal assessments are administered in the form of an examination. After teaching instructions are delivered from the curriculum to ascertain a quantitative grade or percentage to determine students' achievement levels in various content areas. Example, students' report card is a summative, quantitative, and qualitative data on students' performances. Formative assessment. Observing students at task using a checklist to determine students' strengths and weaknesses they are having during the teaching and learning process. Do a question and answer quiz to determine how well students are grasping concepts. Include art. Have students draw what they learn. Use poems and songs. Have students write a poem or song on a given concept. Project. Have students create a basic model of what they have learned. Involve students in various presentations and competitions to bring out the skills they have learned. Portfolio. A useful collection of students' work can highlight challenges or strengths students are having during learning. Here, I was observing my students matching the uppercase letters of the alphabet with the lowercase letters of the alphabet. In this activity, a letter wheel was made out of construction art paper, and the uppercase letters were written around the circumference of the wheel on the board. Clothespins were there, and on the clothespins were 26 lowercase letters of the alphabet. During this formative assessment, I detected that the students recognized the letters of the alphabet and was able to match all the lower and uppercase letters. Literacy Day competition. As the literacy coordinator of 1 to 3, students were asked to present in creative ways the areas in literacy they have grasped and wish to present. Students made letter picture association bids, poster, word families, model of an anchor to depict vocabulary development, and an alphabet picture shirt. Spelling bee competition. Students of 4 to 6 were engaged in spelling bee competition to build vocabulary and improve written and oral language. This was also used as an intervention strategy to address the challenges students were having, especially in reading. Character Day presentation. In library science, students are introduced to story elements, and on Character Day, they were asked to select their favorite character from a fiction or nonfiction book they have read and present a main idea about the antagonist or protagonist character or problem or solution they were a part in the story. Student leaders presentation. I engage students in Kiwanis Builders Club meetings where I mold young leaders from grades 4 to 6 to lead club sessions and engage children in grades 1 to 3 to various leadership activities. This develops students' confidence and interest in their learning. Summative assessment or examination. A combination of all types of tests makes summative assessment or examination more meaningful. This effectively tests the various types of learners, such as the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Therefore, not all examinations are written. Some are hands-on. Examples of summative assessment: multiple choice exams, and these are the closed-ended questions exams, true and false exams, as well as matching. Short answers are open-ended questions, as well as we can include creative styles of summative assessment, such as art, where students can create or design a poster or flyer. And in this case, in Jamaica, they were asked to do a poster or flyer on the contribution of the Tainos to Jamaica's culture. Students can also use poems. or song. So they can write a poem or song to explain nature, for example, using figures of speech. Students can also be given final projects as summative examinations. Students will have to apply more concepts and skills to create a model of what was taught. This is more hands-on. For example, creating a model of a book using construction papers and pages. Students were asked to give their books a title and write their own fiction stories. Here is an example of my final project that I assigned students of 4 to 6. Here they were placed in the library to create their own books made from construction art papers. They used printing pages to affix in the middle of these books, and then they give their book cover a title. They write their names as their own author, and they determine the classification of the book, whether it was a fiction or nonfiction, and they proceeded by writing their own story on the blank pages. This is also a final project, and this project was a combination project with students and parents where they created a model of Louise Bennett Coverley. Now, Louise Bennett Coverley is the person who our school is named after. So she's our cultural icon, and we really appreciate her in our learning culture in the institution. Here, I use art posters, and I was now forced to do posters online due to the lockdown measures. I used the Google Classroom where I assigned students different tasks, and they were asked to use art to create posters on the contribution of the Taino to the Jamaican culture, as well as all the ethnic groups that came to Jamaica and all aspects of their culture that they brought to Jamaica. So students did these art pieces in the Google Classroom, was marked in the Google Classroom, and they were assigned their points. This is an extraction of a poem that a student wrote, and this emphasizes nature, and figures of speech were used to highlight nature in this poem. It reads, nature, like and as, simile, simile, simile. The night is cold as winter, the tree is high like the sky, the rain flows by like the fog in the sky. The moon is big like a sun. These are some online assessments and examination modes, or rather things that we have been utilizing since the lockdown, since we're not at school, to actually physically do face-to-face assessments with students. And most recently, I have included the Sterling Colot app, Fiction Express, iExcel.com, quizzes.com, and Live Worksheets. And for the presentations and the competitions, these are now done on Zoom and Google Classroom, where students still get an opportunity to create their art posters or make their books or whatever it is that they want to showcase. And they have time that they present these things on Zoom. Also, we use Google Forms to create a combination of tests such as multiple choice, true and false, and matching. And Class Dojo is also used currently as a meaningful platform to collect students' portfolio. High stake testing. According to Hamilton 2002, as the public and government have demanded increased accountability of how effective schools are educating our nation's children, high-stake testing or standardized testing are important. In Jamaica, high-stake testing are considered to be more reliable when assessing students' performances, especially when comparing students' knowledge at a specific grade or age level. High-stake testing are mandatory in Jamaica from grades 1 and 3 to 6 and grades 11. They are useful in the recommendation of students for intervention plans, promoting students to grade and other schools. Example, grade 3 diagnostic test, grade 4 to 5 numeracy and literacy exams, grade 6 primary exit profile PEP exam, and grade 11 Caribbean examination council exam. Now, as you can see, students are being forced upon these high-stake testing exams as early as grade 1. And based on the pattern, you will have realized that they spend most of their lives as ordinary human beings where they're supposed to be enjoying learning and having fun with information that they are learning. They have to now spend all of that time and effort into ensuring that they prepare for these high-stake exams in order to do well. So in other words, students really don't get time to really learn and focus on the fun there is in learning because they're always so pressured in preparing for these exams right throughout their grades. However, I strongly believe that high-stake testing preparation puts great pressure on teachers and students. It creates anxiety and fear in both teachers and students due to the fact that scores are used to compare students' performances and also to evaluate teachers. I strongly believe that alternative assessments can be used as a substitute to high stake testing. And these are my various references. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Roxanne, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Particularly loved your spelling bee and your character day. And I think that that is so important for, showing the other methods of assessment, particularly oracy, which we're going to hear about later. But thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Roxanne? Roxanne, would you unshare your screen? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Don't worry, we will have another opportunity for questions at the end. But thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. You're most welcome.
Right, and we now move to our colleague, Tony Camilleri. Tony, would you like to take the screen?
I would be delighted to, thank you. It's really strange actually to be this end of actually sharing the screen. I'm normally introducing it and not actually, if I can get the PowerPoint to work, I'm not actually delivering it normally, am I? So the whole point of us spending a bit of time with you now is actually to share the vision that has evolved through this amazing community, through working with you lot, and thinking about being a global community, which is one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic. It's been a painful experience for most people, but there have been some silver linings to this. And I just wanted to share where we were up to with our vision and how we can work with you to help you join the journey, really, of being a recognised and award-winning global school. So I've got, like I said, put together a small presentation that I'm just going to help guide my chatting to you, really. James did introduce me before. I'm normally hiding. I don't normally talk about myself very much, but yes, I was qualified as a primary teacher. I have worked through all different age phases. I've done my early years professional status, so I've worked in nurseries and kindergartens, and I've also done a lot of cover work in secondary school. So I have covered from birth to 18-year-olds and everything in between. But the biggest thing that has sort of impacted me is how I have seen firsthand the impact of a supportive school, the difference a good school makes to those children. So I have 4 children of my own, and they were so lucky to go to some amazing schools. My boys went to a school that had a link with China, and that definitely changed their life. Having a trip to China, having that experience has changed their whole personality and future. So that was inspirational. I've been working with this company since its creation, and I've had the honor of organizing international trips, seeing students travel around the world, seeing them change in front of my eyes, growing in confidence, just having these life-changing experiences. It's been a privilege to see and to be part of, and to offer that opportunity. So that's why I'm quite passionate about sharing our vision, these opportunities to network, to communicate, and all the experiences we can put together between us. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm quite passionate about it. Our main link has been with China in the past, but now that it's global, it's even more exciting. So the aim is really to share our vision about global education, which I think is more important now than ever, on how closely linked we are. The world is changing. It has changed. The pandemic has changed it, but it has always been changing. And I think the speed of change has increased rapidly, which is not a bad thing as long as you can keep up. So that the way children learn and what they learn has had to evolve, and even more in the last 12 months. A lot of our vision has come from the World Economic Forum, the Education 4.0 framework, to sort of highlight the fact that the skills children need nowadays are not the same as they were even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. When I was a student, my skills are totally different. So what they need to learn, what they need to survive in this global economy is very different. And how they learn those skills, how they accumulate those skills is very different. So the experiences we need to give them and provide them to develop these skills has changed. So it's a matter of keeping up with that. And we've kind of, an acronym of global capital. What a global school and global education based on the World Education Forum, ideas and vision. So what we're looking at is, as educators and schools around the world, what I love about this community is how supportive we are and how sharing we are of anything, like Roxanne was just saying, the things that worked for her, what she did, what's exciting opportunities she's given her students, sharing that. Students and teachers are great at sharing their ideas, and we can all develop on that. So we are basically responsible for creating these world of opportunities for students, aren't we? That's what, as educators, we are. So we, in England, we have a thing called cultural capital, which is part of our curriculum, but I think really it should be recognised as global cultural capital. So to define what I mean about cultural capital is, it's the capital, it's the assets a student has, basically. It's the knowledge and competences, the skills that we provide them with, that they develop themselves from the experiences we've given them, which enables them to be more successful. It gives them the assets to aspire. We need to give them these aspirations. We need to show them how they can achieve them, give them the skills to reach there. So this is the capital that we are investing in those students for their future, to give them a chance to be successful in the new global world out there. So this is what our vision is about global schools. The fact that it needs to be, what we're offering our students has changed, and what it needs to be more globally orientated. It needs to be embedded in it within the principles of the school, the ethos, your curriculum, to provide global capital, to develop global citizens. We have a social, moral, spiritual, and cultural curriculum in the UK, which is a very general description, but it covers the well-being of the whole child, not just the academic things we are teaching them. And again, we also believe it needs to be from a top down. It needs to be from management. It needs to be backed by the leadership of the school. It needs to be within policies, because we have some great teachers out there. But when you're shouting out on your own, it doesn't happen, does it? You need the backup and the support of the whole school. Excuse me, I'm going to struggle with my cough today. So these are what our vision is for a global school. I'm going to have some drink, I'm sorry. Apologies. So basically, to become an inspirational global school, you need the vision. You need to share this vision with everybody, within the community, within the school and the leadership. There needs to be a plan. It needs to be embedded effectively to be effective, basically, to work. And without targets and aims, then there is no direction. It doesn't happen, does it? Excuse me. So basically, this is our example of what I feel anyway, it is an international policy. The sort of basics of an international policy is having global dimensions embedded within the curriculum, your internal and external curriculum. So not only what you sort of have to provide, but all the add-ons as well. Engaging students in their own cultural identity, which also helps foster respect for other cultures. Until you have, your own roots, it's hard to look out, isn't it, and think about other cultures. It makes you focus on your own culture as well. We need to prepare these students for the diverse global society that's out there, so they can work effectively within the global economy. Everything is more mobile. We hope once we start moving around the world, everybody will be able to be more mobile and integrate, but we can still do that online. Develop these links, develop the online links to begin with. So obviously working with partners, working in an amazing community like the Global School Alliance, where everyone supports each other, is a great start. Getting lots of ideas, mixing with all the other cultures, sharing our cultures with each other, and developing these links. So this is sort of thing you need to think about in your vision, you need to put together in a plan, and you need to get the staff on board in the school. So your management down to the cleaners, everyone needs to have the same idea and have the same vision and backing it, because it's amazing how all the little things build up to an image and to the confidence in the children themselves when they see everybody on the same page. So that's the kind of our vision of how you would do a global school. And what we also believe you should be recognised for it. It's great putting all these opportunities. People love certificates and awards, as we're very well aware. And so we put together an award scheme, which will give you a kind of roadmap on how you can develop the opportunities from a bronze level to a silver level to a gold level and get the recognition, have certificates, have awards that you can demonstrate. And of course, there always is somebody who needs to be responsible. Somebody has to wear that hat to make sure it's incorporated and happens. So we're looking at celebrating yourselves as well and getting a certificate to call yourself an expert international coordinator, because you'd have done the hard work to make this happen. Everybody needs recognition. So we've developed these Global School Awards, which you'll see on the Global School Alliance website very soon. We're going to be telling you about this every month to remind you on what you can do at each level and how to access them. So basically, the bronze level is, I think, what most people are already doing. I think a lot of you out there are already gold levels, so you can get all awards almost immediately. But the bronze level is the basics. It's the start of the journey. It's just doing things like having cultural activities within school, assemblies, displays, international days, having a designated international coordinator responsible for it, being members of groups like this, attending conferences like you are, having a policy though, and an action plan on how you're going to develop the cultural capital and skills for the children, have it in place and visible so people know what it is and follow it. So that's just basically the easy entry level, which is bronze. Being part of the Global School Alliance means you are already bronze, really. So I've put my picture of the Global School Alliance in there. So silver is really a bit more when the students are more participating. This is online activity. So at silver level, we consider you would have virtual partnerships happening online. There'd be online programs and skills that the students can participate in. So they can do joint projects, mix with other cultures all together, getting staff involved, getting training for them, CPD. And this is where our new online platform, the Global School Alliance, is going to help. So this is where we are setting up that connectivity with our online platform. We'll have masterclasses to help support you and hold your hand and set these up for you. Or if you're IT savvy and you know what you're doing, you could just automatically go on and you can take the application process and find out for yourself and apply. But so we can help you, support you as much as you want, or you can get on with it yourselves. But what we were trying to do is provide those resources, provide that scaffolding for you. So if you haven't already checked it out, the new platform that used to be called Learning Unleashed is now combined with the Global School Alliance platform. So you can go on there now already, look into groups, join groups. We've blended it, so you will need to register if you haven't already, but it's free. It just means you need to create your own access to it, your own password to get on, and you can form groups and start doing projects. But as we're part of a community, we want you to help develop this with us in a way. So we're going to develop the resources on there, ideas for projects. We've got some basic levels and templates we're going to be putting up very soon. Things like video pals, where you basically just share language learning on a video links and that sort of thing to help each other with each other's languages. But if you've got ideas, share it on here with us. You're all part of the same community. Put things up on here with us and we'll develop these great projects that can be done. this is what it looks like at the moment. We want you to develop it out. Here's an idea of some of the groups that are already on there. You can make your own groups, join these groups. It's a fantastic opportunity. So that this is basically all the online stuff that we consider the silver level. But to me, the gold level is what you need to aspire to. Gold level is the active one where you're physically going around the world and meeting people, going to those, you can't beat physically being in another country, the sights, the sounds, the smells, things you can't recreate online. I think they are the biggest life-changing experiences for students ultimately. It's not only the other cultures, it's what they learn about themselves. They can travel, do international travel, long haul travel with peers or on their own, experiencing it firsthand. You just can't beat, can you? So this is what the gold level is, having an active sister school partnership where you can form a longer term relationship to do these sort of projects, sending students on international trips, research and delegation trips for CPD for staff around the world too, hosting it with your own school. So your whole community can be part of hosting students for internationally, doing inspirational projects. And obviously by the time you get to this level, you will be an expert international coordinator who's organised it and gets a certificate for that. And as I say, we have masterclasses and support for you to do this all along, and we help you do it. So that's what we consider our sort of roadmap and the ideas you can do at each level and how to access them. So we hope that's a kind of inspiration for you to develop within your own school. And of course, the person responsible is always in the background usually, isn't it? These poor people, and I bet most of the people on this line now are these people who are doing this, who are promoting the importance of global links, who are sort of providing all the support, giving advice, signposting ideas. You need recognition too. You need a proper title, an expert international coordinator. You need to be recognised. So we'll get that certification for you as well. And doing all these experiences is evidence for you. So this is us basically saying you can realise a world of opportunity through international coordination. So this is sort of just me introducing our vision with you and what's available out there. So you can apply straight away for the Bronze Award if you like. There's a link on this page here. You can go straight to that link, do the self-assessment, see if you think you're ready. You'll get a report and it'll tell you what level you're at. And if you think you're already bronze, you can apply for that. But I'm also happy to have one-to-one calls so that we can work a plan between us. We can say, right, where are you at now? What's in place? What's your next steps? What are realistic for you? We can work on a plan. I'm just happy to chat. As you can tell, I like chatting and I'm happy to help and support. So my email's there, or contact me through GSA, anything like that. But basically, get on board and let's get some inspirational global schools developed or recognised, because I'm sure you're all out there already. So thank you very much for my waffling and listening to me. And I'm going to hand it back to James for the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Tony, thank you so much. And with your cough as well, that was marvellous. I know you will be sharing that link in the chat as well. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Thanks, Tony. And we will go to the next speaker. Okay, and the next speaker is Paul Hume. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Paul unfortunately can't be with us this afternoon, but he was very kindly sent us a recording of his presentation, which I'm going to play to you now. So this is Paul. He's the deputy head from a bilingual school in London.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I'm the deputy head teacher of a small bilingual school in West London. And I'm going to be talking to you about the impact that COVID has had on assessment in our school. So how do we assess? Well, like all schools I've worked in, we use a mixture of formative and summative assessment. In terms of formative assessment, that would be our day-to-day assessment for learning, strategies that we use, our questioning, the marking and the feedback that we give our students, our cumulative mind maps in our foundation subjects, target setting with children, getting to peer and self-assess and reflect, and all of that working together to inform our next steps in our planning sequence. In terms of summative assessments, well, we use a mixture of end-of-topic quizzes, weekly retrieval checks, that could be for vocabulary or key concepts and ideas. We have half-termly assessments, in Key Stage 1, we have a phonics check as well, but in Key Stage 2, we also have assessments in reading comprehension, writing, and maths. And because we're a bilingual school, we also have whole school bilingual assessments twice a year, where we all work together towards the same objective, but we all approach it at the level that our class are able to, in terms of showing as best as they can their level of English proficiency and Russian proficiency, working together towards an outcome. So I think the one that we've done at the moment is about how we keep ourselves safe. And so the younger school in Key Stage 1 and reception, they focus more on just looking after themselves, how to keep yourselves safe in terms of how to keep yourself clean. And then working away further up the school, where they focused on online safety. And then at the top of the school in Year 5, we're looking more at mental health and well-being. So same sort of same key idea, but approached in a slightly different way, and showing off their proficiencies in both languages. So we do that twice a year as well. We at the moment we have our
James, are you able to check the video? I can't hear any sound.
Sorry, did you say you couldn't hear any sound, Tony?
It went silent on me. I'm not sure if everyone else, and also it was not flowing very well.
Okay, that might be a problem with the video. I'm very sorry about that. Thanks, and I'm sorry if people have been sitting in silence if you didn't hear the sound to that video, which we will review. Okay, in that case, then I'm going to move on to our next speaker. Let me just share my screen again.
in terms of the skills that they can choose to go to.
Okay, and our next speaker is Drew Lett. I'm just going to get his presentation up here.
You don't have a presentation from me. You only have me, I'm afraid.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Drew. Here's a photo of you.
Oh, I don't think anybody wants to see that, to be honest.
Well, shall I? I'll unshare then. Would you like to just address from your laptop?
Yeah. So I'm going to share a couple of things.
Yeah.
Firstly, good evening to everybody. It's been some really interesting discussions going on. I'll be honest, I wasn't in for the very start of the meeting. But some certainly very interesting things. So I'm here to talk about. Hi, Christina. I'm here to talk about assessment versus testing, which I think is can be quite a complex issue. Spoiler alert, I suppose. I would be much more leaning towards assessment and AFL and what goes on in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, as I'm sure many of you are, but I do also realise that there is a place for standardised tests. So a little bit of background about me. I'm assistant head teacher. I work in a very, very large school. We have about 3,500 children. So we go all the way through from Key Stage 1 sorry, FS1. So we're all the way through from FS1 to from our tiny little guys, all the way up to the end of year 13. We're based in Abu Dhabi, and we're part of an even bigger network, which is GEMS, who I believe still are the biggest provider of education. So there is obviously a corporate side to what we do, as well as the kind of fundamental education side. I spent 7 years teaching in the UK, my NQT year, and some leadership roles in PE and in maths, a few middle leadership roles, and then moved out to Abu Dhabi 7 years ago. I'm currently in charge of assessment in our primary phase. I work quite closely with the vice principal, who kind of heads assessment across both. I'm sure you can imagine, they're very different, what we do in FS as to what we do in year 12 and 13, especially this year. So there's a lot of collaboration between us. And I wanted to talk about two main things. So one of them is the GL assessments, which we use, which are an international standardized assessment. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. I'll talk a little bit about them, but I'm not going to go into too much detail, because I think you can go and find a lot of the information out if you wanted to, and if it suits your school's context. The thing I want to talk about a little bit more would be a new resource, a new website, or a business that we've partnered with called Learning Ladders. So I'll begin by talking about GL, and kind of what we do as a school. It may be helpful to some of you. I'm very sorry if it's way below what many of you do, but it maybe give you a background. So I'll just share my screen. I'm going to flick between a PowerPoint that I used to share with parents, and then also the Learning Ladders website, which we use, if that's okay. And if I get boring, I'm very sorry. Please tell me to be quiet. Okay, so I presume right now you can see everybody on the screen.
You can see that, Andrew.
Okay.
Right through.
You're all very handsome. You should be very proud of yourselves. So the idea of this PowerPoint was to introduce our parents. I do it on a yearly basis, to be honest, to what GL assessments are, and also what we do as a whole school on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So the background I give them is, why do we assess children? Why don't we just teach children again and again every day? Surely they're learning new things. And as you can see on the screen, I won't insult your intelligence to read through everything, but it's basically to identify the gaps in learning. And that's what our day-to-day assessment is. This has been quite a challenge, I suppose, for the school I'm in. We're multinational. We have teachers who, about 40% of our teachers are trained in the UK. We have some trained in Ireland. We have some trained in South Africa. We have a lot of teachers from India, from the Philippines, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from all over the place. So very multinational school. And obviously they've been through different systems as children and as teachers themselves before they came to Abu Dhabi. So we're going through the process now of a culture shift of not just basing all of our assessments on a big, scary, stressful for the children end of year assessment. And that's kind of been my push for the last 12 to 18 months. So I would normally talk with them about the different ways in which we assess children's learning. So especially down in FS and Key Stage 1, that would be much more based on the observations of teachers during the day, even down to post-it notes on pieces of work and photographs taken. As you move up the school, then we've obviously got things like big writing, and we do end of topic assessments. We use rising stars for some things. Across the last year or so, we've been very wary of sending all of our assessments home for children to do remotely, because a lot of those assessments, like a rising stars, will be the same next year. So if there's any siblings, they know what the test is going to be. So through COVID times, we've kind of rewritten those assessments and used MS forms, which has been really good for data analysis, perhaps. And then historically, that was then where our GLs would sit. They would corroborate, would probably be the right word. They would corroborate the teacher judgments that they've made throughout the rest of the year and make sure that the teachers aren't just giving an inflated grade to make themselves look good, realistically. The GL tests are, I did have a video to show you, but I don't think anybody wants to sit through somebody else talking about it, so I'll shorten it for you. They're basically a test that is designed to cover everything that the child will or should have learnt up to that point. So if they're in year 4, that test could include questions that they may have covered, or topics they could have covered in year 1, year 2, year 3, but also in year 4. A child in year 5 is going to get questions obviously from year 5, but also from potential questions from year 2 and year 3. The main drawback for me is that the tests don't change. So they're very different to how, say, the SATs used to work in the UK. So I spent a long time as a year 6 teacher. And you don't know the questions that are coming up. You teach the children the skills, and yes, you practice lots of questions, but you hope that you've given them enough experience of similar questions that when they see this, they'll go, I know how that looks. I know what I should do. I know what skills should apply. The GL tests are a little different. They're all done on a computer, which is amazing in some ways because it then gives you this gargantuan amount of data. And we do have to be careful with how we share that data. Some of the data only goes to class teachers. Some of the data goes to middle leaders. Some of the data goes to our senior and our exec team. And some of it we share with the government. But there does have to be, they have to be judged against something that if a school wanted to, and I fought quite heavily against this, that a school could cheat if they wanted to. And we obviously all hope that that doesn't happen, but there are some situations where I'm sure it does. So we've worked really hard to use the GLs and adapt our teaching slightly towards the GLs to make sure our children have a great chance to succeed. But we are also very aware of a school of their limitations. A GL test for a year 2 child would look something like this. So they're going to sit this on a computer, and there's a lot of drag and drop. You can see in question 21 on this slide, for example, they will need to type an answer into the test. And basically the children get given a code, they click on a website, and then they work their way through the test. There's obviously lots of different ways you can do this. We treat them very much like they are a SATs test. So we will read certain parts of it as long as there's no mathematical language, for example, in the maths test. We won't read mathematical words. We won't explain mathematical words. But obviously working in the UAE, we have a lot of EAL children. So we don't want them to be held back because their understanding of a verb affects them answering a maths question. Consequently in the science as well. But obviously the reading test can be quite challenging for some of them. I'm going to flip to, so that's kind of our end of year data grab, if you like, our corroboration of what goes on. But something we wanted to do to support our teachers in the day-to-day judgments they make was to move over something to a tool that helped them. So we use the words emerging, developing, secure, and then mastery. And what we'd found, and from speaking, I've got friends who are head teachers in the UK and class teachers in the UK, and they found it very hard. The new curriculum, for anybody who's kind of UK based or English curriculum schools, found it very hard to put a stamp and say this is where the children are at. The move to life after levels, I suppose, is kind of hate the phrase, but levels worked, in my opinion. They were great. They were a way of judging a child's progress from year to year. Everybody understood them, teachers understood them, parents understood them, and as they worked their way through Key Stage 2, the children understood them. And now there's kind of this big fuzz around what a child should be at different ages, or certainly that's the experience I've got at the moment. And we wanted to really be able to drill down into where a child is, what progress they've made, and help teachers doing that. Because as I say, we have teachers who've never taught in the UK. They've never learned how to teach in the UK. They're teaching a curriculum that they didn't even go to school and learn anything similar. So it has been quite challenging, but Learning Ladders, and I don't work for Learning Ladders, I have no corroboration with Learning Ladders, but it has been really helpful as a tool to help teachers make a judgment on how much of this curriculum in year 5 or in year 2 is my child confident in, and are they emerging, are they developing, or are they secure? So I just want to show you a couple of areas of the website. Please let me know. I hope that my screen is going to change. So if it doesn't, please shout or put your thumbs up, or all of those type of things. So this is kind of the end point of term 2 for what a lot of teachers will see. So I'm going to kind of work backwards. It does have to be put into context here. So this is the first time we've used Learning Ladders. So there are some parts of the data that are a little bit skew-if. Our progress data isn't perfect because the children don't have judgments made from the previous year. But for attainment, this is pretty much where probably an average class in our school would be. So if I just move that, apologies, make it all smaller. The teacher will make judgments against the learning that the children have done, and Learning Ladders and all its clever, what's the word, macros and coding and all this type of thing that I can't do, will then come out with a set of data or a judgment for each individual child. And we've set ours up against our curriculum, which is that they are either working towards. So basically that is a child who is, let's say, in year 5, and maybe they're working actually at the level of a year 3 or a year 4 child. So they would come up as red. So you can see in this class, for example, we've got, probably shouldn't show names, apologies, but that's where they're working. And as you can see, as you move your mouse over the different colours, you get a judgment on where that child is. Now this is maths. Generally our children are actually working above, both in GL and on Learning Ladders. We see our children do really well in maths, and English is our challenge because, as I said, there's lots of EAL. So you can see from this that we obviously have 46% in Spring 2. So this is the most recent section of data. So 46% are secure. We then have 43% are developing, with 10% emerging. And you can see how the clever ones amongst you will realise that 3.33%, the red one in Spring 1, that was a child who was working below, and he's actually moved classes. So that's where he's disappeared to, because it was more suitable to work with an LSA in the same class. So there's lots of data you can get from this. So that's kind of the end point, and how it's useful for a teacher in terms of just making a judgment. But what I'm going to now do, and you'll have to bear with me a second, is show you what it appears like for a class teacher as they make their judgments. You'll have to bear with me because I don't do this as often as I should do. So a class teacher will select their class. At the moment, I'm in charge of assessment, so I can see all the classes throughout the school, which obviously is an awful lot. But they will select their class, of which they'll only be able to see one, to be honest. So it's a very quick role for them. So look, we were looking at 5L, so we'll do the same. It's actually a really lovely class, this, and their teacher's fantastic. So I'm sure you can imagine who he is. And then you choose your rung years. I'm conscious you can't see that. So our year, all of the rungs of our ladders, if you like, set up around our different classes. And you can import the national curriculum if you're working in a different curriculum. If you're working, say, the American curriculum, you can import that. Or you can import your own curriculum, which is what we've done. So we adapted our curriculum and our objectives just to make them a little bit more easier to explain or to understand for some of our parents, who obviously many of them English is their second language. And then what the teacher does, so I'm just going to scroll across. So these are judgments that have already been made by this wonderful class teacher. And they make these judgments throughout the year. And a 1, the way we use it in our school, a 1 means that the objective has been introduced to the children. So they've sat in a classroom while this learning objective has been taught. A number 2 means that they're able to complete the objective, but they may need support from an adult or from a peer to be able to complete their learning or to achieve the objective, perhaps. 3 means they're secure, and a 4 means that they've mastered it. And again, the way we phrase that with our children and our parents is if a child has mastered a skill, then they are able to support another child and really explain their work in that. So they'd possibly be a class magician or whatever phrases you happen to use in your class. So as I'm going through this, we're actually just teaching shape and geometry in year 5 at the moment. We're just teaching angles this week, so I'm going to make some pretend judgments, if you like. But let's say that this child is able to do it independent. I click this, I choose the assessment window I want to do it in, and we're doing it in summer, and it makes that judgment against the child. Now that looks like it could potentially be quite long-winded, but what you're also able to do, you can maybe see the bulk assessment button here. So you will know if you teach an angle lesson, you're probably going to know that most of your children understand that we measure angles in degrees. So I taught this earlier in the week, and I know that the minimum for all of my children, there were probably 4 or 5 that need a little bit of support, but all of my children were able to do it at least with support. So I can click that and it will make the judgment for everybody. And then I can just go through and go, do you know what? And again, I'm making this up, but let's say this young lady, she mastered it and she was able to teach some other children how to do this skill. Whereas actually, let's pretend that this guy here, he was in the lesson, but he didn't really understand anything that was going on, and his teacher didn't do a great job of showing progress. And that's basically what Learning Ladders is. The reason we've gone to this is that, as with many schools, perhaps, if you remember the old APP sheets, we were still doing something very similar out here. And I am aware that nationally, we're probably with a lot of things, maybe a year, 18 months behind what's going on in the UK. I think that some things were ahead, but some things we're definitely behind. Our teachers were taking home an English book that the children had worked in every day, and they were taking home a maths book that the children had worked in every day, and a science book that the children had worked in every day. And if you've got 30 children in your class, that's 90 books. You mark those books, and we had target sheets in the back of the book, and the teachers were expected to make a judgment against all of those objectives that they were supposed to teach. So in this example, do the children know that they're measured in angles? And they were supposed to highlight that target to say they taught it, and then they were supposed to put their dates in, say, yeah, we taught this on this date and he achieved this on this date. And then another piece of evidence to say that, yep, definitely we know this child can do this. And then at the end of the year, all this wonderful work that's been highlighted and annotated and examples collected went home with the children in an exercise book and was never ever seen again. The data didn't go anywhere from it. Nobody knew what the children had done or what the children had achieved, other than what was on the child's end of year report and what the children achieved in their end of year test. So this has given us a way, and I'm conscious I've taken plenty of time, but This has given us a way of tracking data throughout the year. Now that we have a year's worth of data, it'll also give us a way of tracking the progress the children have made year on year. It's also the main benefit, and something I've pushed, is that it's made our teachers adapt their teaching for the different children in their class. And for us, that's huge. For anybody that works in the UAE, to get a very good from ADEC, you need to show that more than the majority of your children have made more than expected progress in a lesson. So you're talking 75% have got to make more than expected progress, which is difficult. It's a really challenging objective, but knowing where the children have come from, knowing what the children's previous learning is beginning to show dividends, and we're seeing a lot more progress generally in our lessons. I hope there's some bits and pieces in there. There's a lot more details I could go into. I'm in charge of maths, and I've also taken on science on the show in the short term until the end of the year as well. So we also are then, as curriculum leads, will go into this. We have 10 classes in a year group, so our heads of year are basically a head teacher in many ways in a lot of schools. And they're able to get a lot of data out from the gap analysis that's then possible from this. So I'm more than happy if anybody's kind of likes the look of it and thinks it could help them. As I say, I'm no salesman for them at all. I actually messaged the founder in the week and said, is there anything you want me to share, or is there somebody should contact? And he said, thanks for flying the flag, but I'm nothing to do with them. So if you think it's something that's useful for you, I can send you an email and get in touch. It's not cheap. We get a discount because we are a big company. So we get it about 50% of the rate that is normal. But there's some really good stuff in it. It will write your reports for you. And it's certainly been good on a day-to-day basis for our teachers. I'm very conscious that I may have rattled on there, so apologies if I did, but if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to do my best to answer them.
Drew, thank you so much. And I know for a fact you've had an extremely long day, and you've proved that you're a new man or a new teacher because you're balancing a young child in the background and you're delivering a webinar. So thank you so much. If there are there any questions for Drew?
She's the best behaved member of the household, I'll tell you.
I'm going to move on because we've got our final speaker, and there will be an opportunity for questions. I don't know, Drew, if you're able to stay with us after your very long day to the end of the session, but if you are, then
pleasure.
Well, but thank you so much for joining us, and it is very much appreciated.
Thank you. Really nice to be involved. Very interested in the things I've heard as well.
If you want to unshare your screen, Drew, and then I'm going to ask Sarah Davies to share the screen. Thank you very much. Sarah, over to you. Could you put your PowerPoint up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll just double check that everything's okay with it. So let's just see. Okay, if you could just confirm that you can see that okay. That's super. Amazing. Fabulous. All right, so thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's very surreal. It's almost like slightly being part of the Eurovision, but you know, we'll get there. I am, of course, at a school in the northwest of England. So I am actually physically in the building as well of school. So I'm very aware of the fact that at any moment site staff could come and turf me out. So I do apologise if in the distance you see some kind of hand waving towards the side. I can assure you that is the conversational code for I'm in a meeting, please leave. Whether it works or not is a different matter. Now, as I said before, my name's Sarah Davies, and I am an associate assistant head and also the head of English over at Multi Academy Trust in the UK. Alongside that, I'm also the author of Talking About Oracy, which is a book that was released by myself, well, and John Catt last December. And I'll be able to reference a bit of that as well. Now, one of the things that we're talking about today is obviously the examinations versus the assessments. And it's just so, when I started looking at this, I feel like I walked down a bit of a, well, I didn't walk, I leaped down a bit of a rabbit hole. And I think that's the way that quite a lot of us practitioners are feeling, no matter where we are in the world. When we look at things like assessments versus examinations, one of the things that this conversation that I'm going to have with you all today is about is understanding that there are positives and negatives to both. And actually, it's about investigating, it's about contextualizing, and I think it's about having an awareness of all of the key areas and the key elements to it that really make it such an interesting discussion to have. I remember way back when in 2012, I actually published a piece for SecEd that was Life After Levels, and ironically enough, what Drew was talking about with the mastery and the understanding of mastery, that Life After Levels, I was participant in one of the schools that was commissioned to do it in the United Kingdom. So I was able to see it being rolled out in the UK and just how that looked for us. Now, what I think can be taken into consideration is the fact that even now, so that was 2012, even now to this day, I could probably write the same article and say that actually, you know, there are still schools across the country and perhaps across, you know, international that are still very much just becoming aware of how to assess at Key Stage 3. Now, what I want to talk about today is obviously the understanding of Key Stage 4, and I'm going to look at Key Stage 4 more from an English perspective. Now, when we consider this, just to put it into perspective for the UK, historically, so pre-2015, we were on almost like a split. And I do know that there are some countries that are still similar to this to the day. So we were on 40% coursework, 20% speaking and listening, and 40% exam paper based with the reading side of it. Now, since 2015, all of this got shifted straight towards examinations and assessments. So actually it became 100% examination based. That meant that for English language, it was based on 2 papers that were each weighted as that 50% each. Now, when we look at those and what they look like on paper, one of the exam boards, and obviously there are several exam boards available, but one of the exam boards, the way that it was weighted and the way that it's structured was about being able to list 4 things. How does the writer do it? Very much the reading section was those 4 questions followed by the writing section on both parts. Now, when we look at that in more detail, we begin to think, okay, well, how does that, you know, how is that significant to all contexts? And it goes back to what I was saying before about seeing and understanding just how the weightings have changed. Because actually, the 20% speaking and listening, what happened was that 20% speaking and listening became almost like a bolt-on. It was an endorsement as opposed to something that supported the approach. It became a part or an element that was an add-on. It was an additional. It was a compulsory element, but it was an additional element. And one of the things that really spurred me on when writing the book was the fact that one of the ways that we actually had to cope with or had to subsidize our understanding of assessments during the pandemic and during everything that happened was they turned around and they said, okay, well, for English language, it's all right, we'll just drop the recording of the speaking and listening component. And it almost became, well, hold on a minute. How important is speaking and listening? How important is the ability to articulate? How important is our communication? Because when we look at it, when we look at why spoken language is important, it allows students to articulate their viewpoints, process their ideas. It supports those who might have those literacy difficulties. So it encourages them to develop their own structure. It encourages students to obviously collaborate with others. And from that collaboration, we can actually see that it prepares them for the success post-academia. Now, this, of course, isn't just a skill that should be adopted in English. And that really drew back the idea of, well, hold on a minute. Not only are we saying that it's not relevant to the GCSE specification, but actually it's not relevant to certain other subjects as well. And that was what almost like the UK stigmatized around spoken language. They came up with this process that it was just something that can be bolt on. But when you think about it, and when you come from the idea of previously I was so before I got into teaching, I was a recruitment consultant. So a lot of my work was based on, okay, can they compose themselves in an interview? Can they listen effectively? Can they explicitly reference all of those oracy skills? Do they understand the fact that actually it's about body language? It's about the way that you present yourself going forward. It's about, you know, the idea that quite a lot of breakdowns come from miscommunication. And I think that by encouraging these conversations and these topics, it really allows our students that success post any examination or post any assessments. And to eliminate it completely from the examination board almost gave it, you know, the nil part, it gave it the nothing. It basically said, well, hold on a minute, it's something that just can be added on. And it's about bringing that to light. Now, obviously, spoken language is just one of the contributing factors. And as I said, as I jumped down the rabbit hole, I've really begun to get quite intrigued into what we needed to consider and what we need to understand when we're considering whether it's examination versus assessments. Now, one of the ways that we can talk about is obviously the biology of it. And the biology of it, I find so fascinating. Obviously, I am not a biology teacher. However, I do know that the pressure to succeed in exams can be particularly overwhelming, as students are made aware constantly that the exams will lead to success in the future, perhaps. I think it's very minimal where a conversation is had with a student where it, you know, where it felt as a line of, you know, don't worry if you don't pass this assessment, because you'll still do well. There are very few and far between those conversations. They should exist more, but they're still very few and far between. And the type of pressure can often actually be seen as a threat, particularly when you're looking at students that are unable to process such a thing. And the reason that they're not able to process is because actually most studies show that abstract reasoning, memory, and formal capacity, they are fully developed by the time that they're 15 and 16. However, they are not mature enough until the early 20s. So it's only in the early 20s our brains are able to process this information. So when we talk about things like it's the understanding of the prefrontal cortex and the judgment, the problem solving, all of the capacity to do so in a stressor situation aren't fully evolved in our systems until those early 20s. And I think a lot of it as well, when we look at these links are critical for emotional learning and self-regulation. And when we look at self-regulation and we look at the pressure and the stress that examinations can bring on our students, in particular our younger students, it brings us a lot of intrigues as to how we can approach this in a way that isn't putting people on a back foot, so to speak. Now, we know, and it has been pointed out by the Harvard Health studies, that stress can actually retard the growth of the hippocampus, which actually the hippocampus is what's responsible for consolidating those memories. So actually, by putting them under more stress and by putting our students under more stress, we're preventing them from being able to retain those memories in that circumstance. And I know that there are so many different studies around there as to how we can ensure that students are able to understand this information. And we, you know, one of the pedagogical focuses that a lot of schools across the world are focusing on at the moment is retrieval practice, and the significance and the importance of retrieval practice and how that can be done effectively at all age groups. But it's very much a case of when we look at retrieval practice, we're looking at in kind of the environments that do not promote the additional stressors. So not in examination based. Yeah. When we're looking at retrieval practice, we're focusing more on almost like these assessment based. Now that's only one part of it. So that's just how we develop as individuals and understanding how that can be impacted. But when we look at other biological or other situational analysis from it, we've actually got quite a few areas. So when we look at, you know, the weather, for example, or allergies or hormone cycles. Now, obviously, like I said before, a lot of this has been based on the research that I've been doing over the past couple of days in order to show it. But one of the most interesting things, and apologies for this, but like, you know, I think it's important to make explicit references to these ideas, is that actually, and there is the male hormone cycle as well, do not get me wrong. But one of the things that I found out was that during the 6th to 7th day is when your body is most likely to experience the most equilibrium. And what that means is that your body has become a natural you know, it's been able to regulate the hormones that you'll feel. We are dealing with, you know, teenagers, we are dealing with adolescents. That is the moment that they are, you know, the peak time to hold an examination is on the 6th or 7th day of a hormone cycle. And I found that fascinating because actually it provides that, it makes them social, it makes them lively, it makes them, you know, quick to act, it makes them quick to react to things. And when we look at the difference, actually there's quite a bit, because what you'll notice is the level of estrogen, as that rises, it causes that fluctuation. And that fluctuation brings with it the body temperature, the concentration. And then when we enter the luteal phase, that is when you're experiencing the confusion, the headaches, the nausea, the mood swing, the aggression. And when you find that, and when you look at that, and when you look at the fact that obviously there is the male hormone cycle as well, and that is still in existence, it becomes almost like a bit of a challenge in itself to gauge when a good time is to actually do an examination. So when is the peak time in order to be able to do an examination? How are we able, and going back to my original slide where I'm stressing from the start that our students, their understanding, their knowledge, their entire English language assessment, which in the UK actually means their place in college on whatever course that they do, is based on 2 exam papers, sat on separate days, but actually generally 3 to 4 days apart. So what was really intrigued, like, you know, is that we're already putting some of our students at a bit of a disadvantage by doing such a thing. And it's, like I said before, it's the exact same with the male side. And it was something that was really intrigued, because then you look at the weather. And I really, like I said, I flew down that rabbit hole at this point. You know, I'm already looking at all of the cycles and everything like that. And now I'm looking at the weather. And I'm thinking, well, hold on a minute. Surely the weather can't have anything to do with it. Well, it does. One of the biggest things is that actually the stress, we've got the uncontrollable stresses, but then the allergies and the weather. Students have hay fever or asthma when pollen counts are high, are more likely to be sitting those assessments. So if you look at the pollen levels that can be provided during that time, and if you look towards the bottom end, now obviously it is completely dependent on country, it's completely dependent on you know, where you live. But if we take for the UK, for example, with the UK, we're more likely to find the middle section. All right, so the middle section is what we're likely to see. Now, if we just highlight when our assessments are, actually when our assessments are correspond with when we are at the peak periods of the highest accounts of pollen. So those that are suffering from hay fever, pollen allergies, once again, the examinations and where they sit, it's putting them at a disservice, so to speak. If you think about the fact that, and what I find quite interesting is that quite a lot of the mocks take place in the UK, quite a lot of the mocks take place in winter. So, and it's usually at the start of winter, so November, December. Now, November, December, it's very, very low. So what we've got there is we've also got a disparity between the two. And that was quite an interesting one to look at. Now, all the way through that, one of the things that we looked at was maybe why examinations shouldn't be going ahead, or why examinations can be faltered or hindered. And I began to think, well, hold on a minute, because actually there are elements that can support with the examinations. In particular, when we look at the fact that the 40% coursework, one of the biggest controversies, or one of the biggest problems that we had, was with the unconscious bias. And this was picked up time and time again with coursework. It's also picked up quite a lot with assessments. And it is, you know, generally as a teacher, I think we all need to be aware of unconscious bias, and we all need to be aware of how that can affect our marking. Now, in accordance with that, one of the things that we have looked at as a cohort is obviously the use and incorporation of comparative judgment. And we're only just starting it. Now, from an extended writing subject, it has the potential to really, really help us, to really support us with developing our assessment strategies in a way that reduces the teacher workload, which is always going to be ideal. But actually, we also need to be aware of the fact that this unconscious bias, and you know, it is still visible during comparative judgment. So we're talking about things like handwriting, We're talking about things like, you know, from a teacher perspective, are you awarding a grade based on your knowledge of the student? And I think it's, you know, it's so important to understand that actually it is natural to be biased. So no teacher can turn around and go, I am not biased, because actually unconscious bias is a natural result of evolution. But what we need to do is have an awareness of this. Like, you know, in order, if we are going to look at moving more towards an assessment driven, if we are going to move, you know, almost back towards a coursework focus, or a focus that is based on an understanding of the student's work in a more holistic approach over time, then we need to acknowledge the fact that that bias exists. And when we're looking at educational bias, we understand that our brains are recognized to make those generalizations. So I am also a lead examiner, and I'm a lead examiner for literature. I know full well that I have to prevent that unconscious bias, because I know that when I'm reading something, after that first paragraph, I've already started putting them in a level. And actually, I'm doing that because my mind is making generalizations based on my previous judgments. It's the same with comparative judgments. My mind is making generalizations based on what's been there before. So it's about recognizing this, and it's about understanding what we can do to stop this, whether it be a case of that if we are looking at extended writing pieces, then, you know, we collect in books open, we collect in books so that we can't see their name, whether it be that we look at typed up versions. So I know that, like, you know, obviously that's something that we could do quite a lot of during remote learning times, was that we had a lot more online versions, and that allowed us, you know, that moved away from this idea and the understanding of handwriting and how handwriting actually plays a significant part in it. But it's very much a case of just ensuring that we have an understanding of it, and that we're able to see how it's almost like it's cyclical in a way. It's this first one that we need to be careful of as practitioners. So when we look at Kanem's work, what he basically said is that there's two different types. And the first type is the fast, the automatic, the frequent. It's the automatic. It's the quick action unconscious bias that we make. The second is, you know, when you think about it, the second is the darker side. It's the one that we should explicitly be aware of as teachers, but we should never explicitly focus on. But the first one is when we're putting it into mark schemes, when we're looking at work and we're saying it's a level 3, it's a level 4, it's a level 5, and so on and so forth. It's quite quick to the point. And I think it's so important to realize that actually when I was doing this research, when I was doing this investigation, I found that there are pluses and minuses. And I think the further down that you go, the further that you can find pluses and minuses to both assessment and examination. But I do think that the biggest thing out of it is, and the thing that has come out of at the moment for us teacher assessed grade, is the opportunity to make a holistic judgment based on evidence over time. And I think that's something, you know, when you're looking at Key Stage 3, when you're looking at Key Stage 2, when you're looking at Key Stage 4, and one of the things that's brought about by the leveling ladders as well is it allows that teacher and allows the individuals to make that judgment based on the progress over time, and not just one explicit snapshot. And that's the biggest things that I found out of it. So if you do have any questions, my Twitter account is at sjdavies87. We've also got the blog and obviously the book as well. But if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me.
Sarah, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant, really stimulating. And the link with the physiological is fascinating. Really interesting indeed, and the way that you've applied that. So I'm very grateful. Are there any questions, please, for Sarah? We will be coming on to open questions in a moment. I was going to put you on the spot, maybe, Sarah, and just ask you if you were to say a best guess. You've said a longitudinal view is better over a long period of time, but is there anything we could do? Do you favour a more sort of an IB flavour where you've got a testing assessment system based on larger parts of coursework?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot. I think the majority of the problems that came from the understanding of coursework were almost like historical. When you look at how far teaching and learning has come, when you look at how far pedagogical practice has come, you know, since 2015, you already see that there has been a distinct shift in our understanding of how students retain knowledge, of how we go around focusing on it. And I think we're at a time period where actually, because of what we've had to go through this year and last year, we're actually at that moment where we could reevaluate the situation, and we could do it in a way that is effective and efficient, as opposed to just prescribed and perhaps undated. So, you know, previously the coursework wouldn't work, but however, what we've done now with the teacher assessed grades is almost like the same component. It's the same kind of approach as what we'd expect to do with coursework. And when we look at the amount that we've done in regards to quality assurance, in regards to standardization and moderation, actually we're doing everything that would have made that approach more effective had it have been done historically.
Thank you. And I was going to follow that with a question to Drew and Roxanne. As primary practitioners, I was previously a year 6 teacher, year 5 teacher, and then a head teacher in a primary school. But primary practice is that great opportunity for alternative modes of assessment. So Roxanne showed her pegs earlier. What do you think? What would you say about the alternative means of assessment to then, you know, to your SATs test, for example?
I was actually going, I very nearly clicked the unmute button towards the end of Sarah's to ask, I suppose throw it back at you a little bit here, but what's the right model? Where's the middle ground, isn't it? It's the be all and end all, isn't it? Is it every term? I mean, we do kind of end of term assessments, and then we do end of topic assessments in science and maths, and we do a big write at the end of all their, we'll do an end of topic write and then a big write at the end of each term. And what's effective, what's a waste of time? And they could, you know, that hour or those 3 hours that they've spent planning and prepping and drafting a big write, is that just 3 hours of lost learning time that you do, I don't know, 3 times a year? Consequently, it's a lot of hours, isn't it? You know, when you add all these up. I certainly think with primary, I think the main reason for assessments in secondary is very different to the reasons probably in primary, or certainly in perhaps through Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. Obviously, it's to get them into the next part of their education. I think probably in the lower years, it's to identify those gaps and work out what to teach them next. But it's really interesting. Obviously, you're in one place and you only hear your own voice, so it's really nice to hear some other people's ideas. It was really interesting, the physiology stuff. Maybe we should let children just take the assessment when they think it's right for them. Here's a month. Sadly, it's no excuse for my poor first year of A levels, but I don't think it was much of an effect on me.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah,
Roxanne, did you want to add anything? I can't hear you, Roxanne. I don't know if you're on mute.
Okay, most definitely. I would like to add that it is very essential to do summative assessments termly and a very last one at the end of the year. So you can see a progressive result in the students' overall performance throughout the year and at large at the end of the year. So if by any chance something goes wrong, you can compare these summative assessments to see how best we can make a determination to have this child or the children put in an intervention plan to develop their weaknesses, or what other things we can have in place at the end of the summer to have them in some enrichment programs to develop the strengths they already have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that sounds, what you've described sounds like a very familiar format. That's definitely something I did in my primary practice. But again, going back to Sarah, do you think in the secondary school, as Drew said, it is black and white. Obviously, students are there. The high stakes are put before them. This is the rest of their lives, their whole careers. Is what we are doing, you know, in the balance of well-being and their actual life to come, best practice?
It's quite an interesting one because I love a big write. I do. I'm not gonna lie. I think, especially for Key Stage 3, it's actually something that we've gone back to, and I think it's about students taking ownership of something and understanding that great works weren't written in an hour and like 45 minutes. Great works are something that is drafted and edited, and that you've had chance to discuss first, that you've had chance to articulate your viewpoints, to plan them, to prep them, to research. So, you know, we've really focused on bringing back this year the concepts of the, you know, the Aristotelian triads and Freytag's pyramid, and making sure that everyone knows just all of the different elements of it, so that they're able to construct something that they've got that ownership of, but then edit, redraft, because that's what it's going to be like after, like, you know, examinations. That is what it will be like, even at university level. For the majority of courses, they're built on the same kind of process, as opposed to just strictly examination based, completely dependent on your subject, obviously, but the majority of them are more, you know, essay based. And it's just so important to get right, really. I mean, you've got those big rights, and I think that the overall is the ability to use those summative assessments, but a collection, and to build up that information over time is such an important part of it, and to allow us to see how that student has performed throughout their academic journey, and not just in the final 2 hours and a half. It's the end of the day. Yeah, and not just the final kind of 2 assessments that they sit in.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a very quick question, because I know everybody wants to move on, but do you see that the main probably barrier, I think everybody would probably agree that teacher assessments are the best way to go. It's every day, it's what this child achieves every single day, and they might have an off day, but you know, that can be written off a little bit. But is the main barrier that the amount of pressure we put on schools, and consequently put on head teachers, and consequently put on curriculum leaders, who then consequently put this pressure on teachers that say this child has to make 2 sub-levels progress, or this child has to make, you know, as I said, in, you know, what we're trying to do in order to get a very good, you've got to show this almost magical amount of progress, isn't it? It's, to me, it's not complicated. I think there's a learning objective, and it's, can you teach the child how to do this skill, move on to the next one the next day?
Well, that's it. And I think it's very much a case of that labels have become dictated by numerical data, and you know, schools are labeled by the numerical process that they're able to bring out of it. And that, it's like you said, it is that domino effect of, you know, I'm part of a multi-academy trust, so, you know, the heads onto the heads, onto the heads, onto the heads, and then finally, and, you know, it disseminates all the way down, and that pressure is there, and it's having that ownership. And it's very clear, and this is where I'll be rational with myself as well, that we wouldn't be able to, I don't think either is a one size fits all. I do think there has to be an amalgamation of the two, not only because of the fact that obviously one on its own has so many different negatives, but also, you know, it's looking at things like the workload process as well. And, you know, so we're looking at things like teacher workload. If it was all assessment based, what would automatically happen if it was all assessment based is that the assessments would get upped in year 11, the amount of assessments that are there. And I think we're seeing that now. And then at the other side of it, you know, when we've got the course, the examination based, and the fact that it's at the end, we're literally putting all of our eggs into one basket, so to speak. So I think in an ideal situation, it would go, ironically enough, it would go back to how it was before, where we've actually got the weighting in all of the different key areas.
Thank you. I've been biting my lip because there's so many questions and comments I'd like to make. It's very stimulating. It feels more like a round table, so I'm very grateful to you. But are there any colleagues listening who've been very patiently waiting to ask a question? I would just like to give anyone else the opportunity to chip in. Do, if you've got any questions, if you put them in the chat. Tony, I don't know if you've seen any questions in the chat. I was going to mention, do just chip in if anyone has a question, but what you said about self-regulation, and that takes me back to foundation stage profile, what goes on in early years. And I often think that that is the most perfect model for learning, where you are observing the children continually, and there isn't that great pressure necessarily to show progress. But self-regulation is a very important component in that learning, and also independent learning. You know, there is, some people say that the older the children get, the further they go through the school, the less independent they become, where we're providing everything for them. Whereas in the early years classroom, they will go off and find their box, and they will find their paintbrushes. So I'd be very interested to hear if anyone from an early years background would have any thoughts on that part of assessment. Okay, and maybe a question then for Laurie, our sponsor. I'm just thinking about the way Classlink is used in terms of providing assessment, the machinery of providing assessment in the 21st century now, where you've got hybrid learning, you've got learning in class, you've got learning at home. The way that Classlink maybe facilitates the assessments.
Hi, James. Thanks for the question. So as Classlink creates an environment in which students and teachers can access all of their digital resources through what we call a launch pad. Looks very much like a smart device. And so any sort of digital applications that would be used for assessment can be readily available within that launchpad, and then the access and the time spent in those applications would be tracked by the Classlink solution. So it would track the amount of time that they've spent, whether they've accessed, who's accessed it, and also give them the opportunity to access any of those resources with just a single click without needing a username and password. So just easing access to all of those resources would be our strength.
Sure. Thank you, Laurie. I was just thinking, Drew, obviously, if you're filling in your learning ladder, it's very helpful if you can do it on your iPad on the sofa, for example, rather than having to be somewhere, like you say, and in the olden days where we had a piece of paper stuck to a page or a book cover, having that sort of versatility does make life a bit easier for a teacher.
Absolutely. Lying on the floor, I remember, for my first few years when I was back in the UK, it was my current girlfriend. We won't talk about her too much now, but you know, you've got all your paper laid out in front of you, and you've got God knows how many sheets of paper, and you're trying to go, what did Samuel get, and what did Timothy get, and what did Sheila get? I never had a Sheila, but I don't know where that came from. But yeah, certainly touchpad laptops have made it a bit easier, but yeah, it's something we've actually been pushing learning ladders to do, just to make it easier in the classroom. You can always, obviously, it's easier to walk around with an iPad. And I'm sure they'll work on it, as I say. Hello.
Yes, the ladder that you're speaking about, I see where you're saying that assessment should be more data driven. So what do you do with this information? Do you like have one-on-one with students to show where they're at and move them along the continuum? What do you do with it when you get the information? Mm-hmm.
Super question. Is that Novalyn? Novalyn, am
Yes,
I saying that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so to be honest, that's the next step I want to do. As I said, we're a very big school, so it's a bit like trying to turn the Titanic out the way of an iceberg. It can be quite a big ship to turn. But yeah, the idea is, we said data, but actually I want to take it much more down the day-to-day, if you like. The idea is pushing stuff. I've never said that before. I like that. I might steal it. Trying to the expectation of our staff at the moment is that when they teach a maths lesson, they are sat and they will make judgments on the children as they are achieving learning objectives, or at the end, as the children go out to break time, they'll quickly, click through which of the children that were successful, or at the end of the day when they're marking their books. I'm sure many of us have put a pile of got it, need a little bit of support, and are ready to move on to the next thing. It's, I suppose, a modern twist on that, if you like. And then, as I say, it's been a little, we're kind of not ready for what you were talking about yet. But that's the idea. So teachers are now looking at the gaps in of the ladder that they filled in, which it will do for you, or you can just look through that sheet that we looked at, but it will give you quite a hefty amount of percentagal breakdowns and different areas that they need to focus on. And actually the way we've done that is that there's been a focus on using starters, so that perhaps if there were 5 or 6 children who struggled when you were teaching analysing data or analysing, let's say, timetables, even if your learning objective is that you're going to be learning about the grid method in multiplication, let's say, for example, it might be that you have a group of children who weren't able to access some learning at another point in the year. You kind of set the rest of your children off. I don't know if many people are kind of au fait with like jigsaw teaching. You'll send those children off and maybe crack on with a collaborative task, or a little bit of some critical thinking perhaps related to the lesson that you're doing that day, but you'll maybe take 5 or 6 or however many children weren't able to access that, or weren't able to achieve fully, weren't secure in that previous learning. And that's the route we're trying to go down. It's by no means perfect yet, but that kind of curriculum adaptation is something we're trying hard with.
Novelyn, can I just ask, where are you from?
Jamaica.
Oh, Jamaica as well. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Do you have any jobs going?
Oh, we're going.
No jobs for me, I mean.
Oh, no, stay where you are.
But I do think, Novelyn, the point that you made, and often as a teacher, as a working teacher, you think, what are we doing with all of this data? What does it really mean? And I would go back to our Sarah in the secondary context. Does, when the child is moving through that secondary school and about to leave, does the school assessment model what is going to happen in real life, further on? Because I do feel sometimes that it's a completely separate activity. It's almost like it doesn't mirror what will happen in a career, in a real workplace.
I think it's a complicated one. I know that obviously Drew mentioned it previously when he was going through his presentation, that at least beforehand you could track that progress. And it's true, you could see, almost like the progress being made from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4. But there are distinct gaps between Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. And then, and I'm looking at this again from a subject specific point of view. It's quite ironic because the skills that you're learning throughout each step are actually used, developed and evolved, but how they're assessed differ widely. And it's like, even when you look at the Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5, that same skill, so let's say critical thesis statements and understanding them, at the start it's, in Key Stage 2 it's your point. In Key Stage 5 it's your critical thesis statement. It's, no matter how many times you sugarcoat it and call it something different, it almost evolves over the way. But yeah, you're right, how it's measured, there are disparities between them that sometimes can prevent students from seeing how they actually link in and how they tie together. And then, I mean, clearly, I don't know, because like from a head of department point of view, I never would have thought that I'd need so many different math skills. And yeah, I definitely do. And so it's what they process and how they take what they can into their post-academia. And I think that's why I was so focused on oracy skills as well, because actually it's something that you're going to need in any job. Like, oracy skills, effective communication is a necessity post academia. And yet it's something that's not getting as much explicit reference because we are so data driven. It goes back to that idea of us being explicitly data driven. So yeah, no, it is an interesting one. It's always going to be up for debate.
Look, Sarah, thank you very much. You haven't been chucked out yet by your caretaker, so I'm very grateful for you staying so long. I'm looking at the time now, and it is actually the witching hour, so we are at a point now where we should really finish. I'm just going to move to the thank you for coming screen. Thank you very much indeed to our speakers. Thank you very much indeed to Roxanne Walsh. Thank you to Paul Hume, who sent his recording. Thank you to Drew. I know you've had an incredibly long day, like an assault course of the day, and still came to join us. Thank you, Sarah Davies, as well. Really stimulating. As a practitioner, I was kind of riveted there, so it's gone right up to 6 o'clock. Thank you to Laurie, our sponsor for Classlink. As we said, our next event will be the week after next, but we thank you again. Don't forget to, there's a link in the chat to claim your attendance certificate, and you must get that as well. So thank you very much indeed for coming. I'm going to finish there and wish you all a very good day.
Right, I'm going to go before I get evicted.
Thank you, Sarah.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Really great.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you. Right.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
And it's been a pleasure being
Thank
here.
you. Thanks, Roxanne.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.